Welcome to Just Business. Today on the show, where is the line between being a visionary and being a liar? Then, what do you do when you realize it's time to shut down your company? And finally, how do you decide which features make your product minimally viable? First up, Henry, are we all just a bunch of liars?
We don't wanna be. We don't wanna be, Drew, and we want to avoid that at all possible, but, maybe we call it peacocking
Right?
or kinda showing off our best sides all the
Mm-hmm.
time. It could be construed as lying, so could be a slippery slope.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's a big part of the discussion we're going to have today is the slippery slope that gets created in the startup environment between, kind of manipulating the truth, and straight up lying and fraud.
Sure. Yeah.
But the first thing I want to get your thoughts on, Henry, I in the book have kind of a chapter that's kind of based around this idea that maybe we are in some ways as founders trained to be liars. And some of the things that I referred to as maybe environments in which we're trained to do that are pitch competitions and like investor pitches. What is your experience with things like pitch competitions?
They're performative, right? So you're trying to hook people on this amazing
Hmm.
idea, and then, um, a lot of it boils down to the energy and the persuasion of the
Yeah,
founder, right? Like, normally the substance of the idea isn't really the thing that's being critically analyzed, it's more
vibes.
the personality and the spirit, yes. The
And
vibes.
I'll
So
say
that would
that
be
I
my
agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm so glad you brought this up specifically so that I can confess that I am, like one of these founders. Like the primary way that we funded Lumastic over the course of 3.5 years was through me going to pitch competitions and just being slightly better than most people at talking on a stage. Our idea was not world changing, like we're making project management software for YouTube creators, which I had to explain, in a way that was like, either movies or like all creative projects. You start like expanding the scope of your idea in order to say like this is a platform. That constant refrain that it's so cringy talking about now is that I would say we're a platform that helps you achieve your dreams, which feels so corny at this point, but was really, like a cornerstone of the pitch of trying to get people excited about this idea that, like didn't fully exist and was realized. That's why we needed like the financial support so that we could keep working on it. And also that I really did believe that it was something that could be extremely helpful for people. And that's the tough part about this is we can both recognize that we're, like manipulating, like kind of the feelings of people, in order to put ourselves in a more positive light. And also in some ways as like people who have a tendency to be, you know, visionary, as it were. Like you kind of
yeah.
start to believe your own bullshit. So, like, what do you think about that, Henry? Is that something that resonates with you? Like,
It does. I hesitate to call you a liar because you tell people we're gonna achieve your dreams, which, yeah, it's emotionally charged, it's supposed to excite them. One of the things I'm most cautious about right now is I'm validating my venture rep bot with content creators going straight into Q4. So the peak of
mm,
sponsorship income, and Repbot is a sponsorship negotiation app. And so when we get these initial users, the data is going to be skewed, and it's no fault of anyone that brand deal volume will increase, rates will increase, budget and activity will all like
mm-hmm.
increase, and that will be in line with the launch of Repbot. So being able to say potentially in 3 to 6 months when we have some data, it's going to be hard for me to honestly say, did this have a positive impact or
Right.
not? It is kind of going to have to come down to vibes almost, which it seems like either way you go, sometimes you fall into stretching the truth or deviating from science. It's a tough
Yeah,
challenge.
I'm glad you brought that up because in so many ways, part of the reason that we get put into this, rock and hard place between truth and fraud
Yeah.
is the fact that for a lot of us, no one's ever done this before, right? We're in new markets, new industries. These are entirely new products. They're new ideas. And that means that there are no comps, right? So we are just completely working off of vibes of like, I believe this will help increase your sponsorship revenue. And that's a belief that, like I really have. And I mean, even me personally, as somebody like not even like directly related to
Yeah.
the company, like it is so much you're trying to find people who believe what you believe. And that is the way you do it is by speaking to the world honestly and truthfully that like I do believe this, right? The dark path that this goes down though is when you do get so much contradictory evidence to your own belief, right? Like how do you know when your beliefs are false? Becomes a really shaking ground. Luckily, this whole concept too has been studied by academics. They called these lies of legitimacy, which is basically the concept that for new entrepreneurs, people working on new stuff, because there are no comps, because the odds are stacked against you in terms of resources, credibility, trust, all these things, the thing you almost have to do to customers, stakeholders, early employees, investors, if that's a path you go down, is basically lie, right? Like fabricate a truth, that you believe and you can get other people to believe in order for them to see you as more legitimate that you are, to give you certain opportunities, including opportunities to just have conversations. What do you think about that one, Henry?
I think it's
Mm-hmm.
true. I feel this way. It doesn't feel great. It kind of I in college I used to build pitch decks as a
Mm.
freelancer, and that was the way I kind of made money in the summers and paid for tuition and food and things like that. It kind of I started to get turned off a little bit by doing that. That these are just lies. These are just
We
documents that
can't
are
all be saving
not
babies. We
true.
can't all be.
Yeah. And,
Your Tinder for
yeah, and
dogs
even if
cannot
that's
be
your
life changing.
intention. Exactly. So something I definitely resonate with. I'm more so interested in how you avoid it or how you mitigate the harm while you do it.
I think that
Maybe
is
more
key.
specifically.
Yeah, Henry, I think that part is key, right? Is the mitigation of harm, because the thing that I often say and talk about in the book is that lying itself is not, to me, morally reprehensible, right? Like there are certain reasons,
Yes,
there are reasons we lie. Like
of
we
course.
lie to in some ways care better for the people in our lives, right? Like that, the truth would hurt too much, like and is not productive. Um,
Mm.
like your parents lied to you all the time when they said that you could be anything and do anything. No, I'm just kidding.
Ouch. Woo.
No, I'm just joking. But the point I'm trying to make here is that like lying itself, not bad. The thing that lying does that can be bad is it causes people to operate on incomplete information. So the white lie about, like whether like I look really good in this t-shirt or whatever it is, like is not, like I mean we could fabricate a tale where it does, like means it some
Sure,
sort of thing.
sure.
But in general, it's not going to harm me. I'm not going to go out into the world and do something harmful to myself or others because I'm wearing this t-shirt. The flip side of that is there are times where lying does cause people to operate on incomplete information in ways that is harmful to them or others. One of the big ones that we can talk about is, I mean, obviously, whether or not your product does what it says it does, but that's like a more extreme example that we'll get to. But the other one being like about the amount of traction you have, right? Like this is a common thing that people manipulate on pitch decks, right? Is like you look for vanity metrics or something like, okay, so what is that? What harm is that going to cause? Well, for like investors that are running a firm or whatever, if you're pitching them, like it could cause them to invest money in your business that like they could invest in others, like especially if you're early and you're like trying to do a friends and family round, right? Like most of the time those people are just investing in you because they like you. But if you're more gutsy than I am and you have friends and family that are willing to stake like real financial backing on your company, and you're willing to take that, it can be detrimental to them, right? Like there are a lot of stories of friends and family of founders that took out second mortgages, like all these things. And you in your mind might believe that this thing is going to work out and that's the only possible thing outcome of this, right? You have that kind of blind optimism and myopia that most founders do, and you need to in the early days to make something happen. But putting that onto other people, and projecting not the reality to other people and not giving them all the complete information can be detrimental. What do you think about that, Henry?
Yeah, it boils down to like the need to get off the ground and the need to get people excited rather than the need of being fully transparent and
Mm-hmm.
honest. The thing that I have struggled with in the past, talking to potential investors, but also today, talking with potential users, is how do you get their attention without overstating your value proposition? It seems like, especially in like making money in B2B spaces, you either have to save them a lot of time or make them a lot of money. Most tools can't deliver on that promise in an extreme way. Like most tools are going to save you a little bit of time. We're going to save you, booking calls internally.
Right.
It's going to save you, a couple minutes a week. But how do we get that idea off the ground? Kind of have to stretch the truth a little bit. And there's that need almost to do that, or at least the pressure. I'm wrestling with the idea of how do you not lie in the early stages to get people excited to just give you a shot. And I think like we're dancing around, as long as you're cognizant of preventing real harm,
Mm-hmm.
like people investing their life savings or, millions of people being defrauded by something that doesn't work and they relied on it to work, you're probably okay. Are we on the same page there, or do we need to take it a step deeper?
I don't know. I would, not to like focus in so much on your situation right now, but
I love it.
there is a world for your product in which you overpromise and underdeliver. Right? That's
Mhm.
what we're talking about, right?
Easily.
Like
Yeah.
is when we put these grandiose ideas of, oh, this thing's going to change the world and will be great for you and your company, whatever. There is a setup we're creating where we overpromise and underdeliver. Sometimes that gap between the overpromise and the undeliver is catastrophic for your customer or whatever stakeholder you're talking to. In your world, right? Like that catastrophe, right, could look like making less money, right? Like in some ways than they would have with a traditional, like sponsorship situation. Um, but I think you're pretty
Let me
mitigated by the fact that, oh no, you go.
let me ask you
Sure.
this. So I agree. I absolutely agree. I think with any business, there's risk of adopting a new tool or
Yes.
a new product or whatever, a new service. You hire a consultant, there's risk there. Everything has risks. When you are a startup founder, do you have responsibility to mitigate that risk outside of your venture? So an example of that would be, I want to get a creator to use RepBot in order to improve their negotiation, make them more money, save them
Yep.
time. Should I also commit my time and resources to get a backup option? Like, is it my responsibility to say, hey, try RepBot, but I'm also going to put in a lot of work to get you money or get you like a safety net in another way? Do you think that is a responsibility?
I would say yes, actually. Like, right, you
Yeah.
have a responsibility to your customer to fulfill, right, the promise and the expectation, right? That's why it's so common, right? We're not told to overpromise and underdeliver, which is what so many of us end up doing because we feel like without it we won't be able to get anyone to use our thing, right?
Mhm,
Right. The
mhm.
thing we
Yeah.
want to do is underpromise and overdeliver, right? So the underpromise, in your world can look like, uh, I'm gonna let you use this tool that will hopefully like make you more money in an automated way. The over deliver is the, and I'm also gonna like basically work as your manager for free, like while you
Yeah.
try out the product to ensure that the product is doing what we actually want it to do.
And I think that's really embracing the notion of do things that don't scale,
Mm-hmm.
but in a way with a lens of it's your responsibility to fulfill the
Yeah.
promise or solve the problem. So even though you're presenting something new and risky and untested, that doesn't mean you don't have to deliver on what you're saying you're trying to solve. So that's a really good thing for me to take back to my business and try to put into
Yeah,
practice.
yeah, exactly. And I appreciate you letting us kind of like discuss it live on air. This was not rehearsed, everyone. This is it's like we're doing
Always.
it live. Now, let's talk about where that breaks down, right? Like we just talked about how do you in a world, over deliver when you've got an early product, you don't know if it's going to work, right? It's that you do what Henry is trying to do, right? You try everything is possible to ensure that your early customers do have a great experience. You be the white glove, right, of service, that extends your product to not just what it can do, either like technically, physically, whatever thing you're working on, but with the backing of you as the founder, to make sure that they have a quality experience, and you get to continue to learn from them, and they get to continue to get value from your product over a long period of time. But in the world where you've overpromised and are under delivering, right, and you're not taking that into account, and there's actually no way that you can deliver on the promises you have, right, that's where we get down the slippery slope into fraud. And we can
Yeah.
see how the same patterns of behavior that we are trained to do as founders, where we're doing those lies of legitimacy, right? Like in those early days, can quickly, as we get to a larger scale of customer bases, become wide scale fraud, where even if we wanted to white glove every customer's experience, we cannot. And that's what happened to. I feel like we could talk about countless founder stories, but the two I want to highlight are Jesse Liu of Rabbit, and of course Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos. Henry, do you know? Can you give the audience a little background about Jesse and the Rabbit R1?
Uh, Essentially, my limited knowledge is AI in a box, being able to essentially replicate what could be in an app,
Mm-hmm.
or might be in a Siri, a personal assistant powered by AI, but in a piece of hardware that raised a bunch of money and sold at a pretty expensive pre-order price tag. If I don't, I'm pretty sure six hundred
No, that's the
dollars.
humane
Is
pin,
that
which I will get to in a comparison. But
okay?
yes,
Well,
the
it's
Rabbit is $200, right? They
okay.
launch
Cool.
to their crypto Discord, which is the company that they were running before that, and say
Yep.
like, we've got AI in a box. It will use apps on websites on your behalf to do actions. They called this a large action model. This was the promise of, you have this cute little orange device, screaming orange device that you can talk into, and it will go do stuff on your behalf, like an assistant. The idea of an assistant would. Where this breaks down, right? The large gap between promise and delivery is in that large action model, which ended up not being at all what they said it could do, right? It was not
Yeah.
backed by any crazy AI. These were hard-coded scripts, using similar tools that you would use to test a website, automated testing in software engineering, where you tell basically a fake computer where to go and click, or like like an automated computer program to go and click, to perform different actions. And very quickly, things would break down and not work because these apps would realize that there's an automated script trying to do stuff on behalf of your account, and that's something that users actually usually don't want. And so
Yeah.
they were quickly shut down. The app, or the physical hardware device, was kind of defunct very quickly, and the company got like absolutely shredded on the internet. Really famous creator, CoffeeZilla, did a big expose, like a three-parter, on Jesse Liu and the Rabbit, to show that this was a pattern of behavior for him. Right before this, the last company he was running was a basically crypto scam, like NFT scam. So we can see that these lies of legitimacy, these patterns of behavior, these like habits that we create as founders can quickly turn us into people that we might not want to be like. So the comparison story that I want to make, though, Henry, before you react, is with the humane AI pin. So the humane AI pin was, founded by like Apple engineers. They were working for like 3+ years on this pin that would like change the way we use phones and have like a smart projector on your hand, and you like do all this. It seemed like the freaking future. Um, in that world, right, there is still over promising, right, and under delivering. But in so many ways, because these products launched at around the same time, but in so many ways, the gap for humane of the overpromise and the underdeliver was so much smaller, right? Like they didn't claim that they had this like large action had revolutionized the way that people can use apps and all that stuff. They just kind of launched a shitty product that had a UI interface that no one actually asked for, but like they did deliver on that, right? It did have a weird projector thing. It just was a bad product, and it was way too expensive for what it was. And that's why we don't think about humane as like grifters running some sort of scam where there's like a class action lawsuit, like against people who bought it. But we might see that for Rabbit. What do you think about this story, Henry?
To me, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier of when are you responsible to deliver on the
Yeah.
process, on the promise? And the answer is you are always responsible to deliver on the
Yes.
promise when you hit the market.
Yeah.
Before you have something, before you have users, before you're charging money, you can sell the promise without delivering. But even if you have a partial solution and you're MVPing, you still are responsible to fulfill whatever your promise
Yeah.
is. So I think that's a good guiding star for all of the tech entrepreneurs and everybody in the crypto space, as well as eh, all of us. Yeah, I think it might appear a slippery slope because you have this vision and you want to realize it and it's going to take a long time, but you have to make money, you have to prove results, you have to get
Yep.
traction. You can do both. You can get traction with a partial solution, but you have to fill the gap and fulfill the promise in an other way,
Mm-hmm.
or it's fraud.
Exactly.
Like it's wrong to do otherwise.
Yeah. The whole thing, the kind of like takeaway I want people to have is to mind the gap, right?
Hmm.
You've got two markers that you create as a founder, like kind of pre-launch of the product and even kind of further out while you're trying to market it and get those first few customers. And that's what you're promising and what you're delivering. Those are the things you get to control. The thing you want, right, is to be in a positive direction where the delivery is above the promise, right? But you can get in situations for a variety of reasons. One of the ones that we're talking about here is the lies of legitimacy, where you have to invert that, right? Like either to get those initial customers and conversations, you have to put the promise above the delivery. And in that way, what Henry's talking about is you're always, accountable for the promise, right? Like, but when you start to invert that, right, you have to mind this gap, because the more deep that you make this gap, the more likely that you are to get into fraudulent territory. And that's obviously the most famous example of this is Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, right? Where not only was that gap so great, that she's like in prison, right? Like, and fined millions of dollars, but that gap was so great, and the delusion around the company and around everyone related to the company, including investors, customers, all that stuff, was so great. The conspiracy was so great that the impact of what that gap created, right, that lie of people operating on incomplete information, was so catastrophic for so many companies and people. So just important thing to know and to be cognizant of: mind the gap.
To me, I know we need to move on here, but it kind of feels like what you're saying is don't shoot for the stars. Don't say
Nope.
something that's impossible just because it sounds
Just
nice.
because you can
Don't
put it on a
promise
pitch deck.
something. Yeah, and that I think could rub people the wrong way of like we want to innovate, we
Hmm.
want to push the boundaries, we want to change the
Right.
world, so we're going to say all these amazing dreams. we can't be doing that. You know, we live in a society.
We
That's
live
one
in
of
a
my favorite things to
society.
say now. Whenever I'm driving on the
Mhm.
roads, people cut in front of me. I'm like, we live in a society. You can't do this. We have norms. It's not just the laws. And I think this is a good example of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't just go around selling lies as dreams when you can't deliver on either. It's just something we can't do. Or you go to jail and you hurt people. Not good. Want to avoid it. Mind the gap.
Mind the
Moving
gap.
on.
All right. Now, Henry, what do you do when it's time to shut down your company? Specifically, I want to know, has this ever been something that you've been unfortunately having to do, and what was your experience like with this?
I have shut down businesses in the past. The impact has been fairly,
Hmm.
contained to be just me and my immediate surroundings for the most part, because relatively small businesses. But yeah, this is something that happens, and I think that the most difficult part for me is kind of accepting it myself, to be
Totally.
honest, is like, now is the time. I have to bite the bullet. And because my companies haven't grown to large headcounts, I haven't really had to think about many other people or stakeholders. But I have had some, independent contractors, people that have worked for me in the past, letting them know that the time has come for us to break up, stop working together on this project is hard. But that's kind of my limited experience with this.
Yeah, yeah, similar in my own experience where so like had other companies before this, but were almost always just sole proprietor, me doing something for somebody else. The company I started out of college, Lumastic, that ran for 3.5 years, we did eventually run out of money and die, like most startups. Uh, and in that world, we were thankfully, like not very big, so pretty self-contained, but we like had uh, taken customers' money and like had like things we needed to fulfill. Back to our conversation about like delivery, but realized that it was just not something that we could pursue anymore, both financially and also I had gotten super burnt out, and I think had
Right.
also kind of burnt out most of our team. So it was just kind of time to shut down. But barring that part, which is a separate conversation that we'll have probably on another episode, is when do you know when to quit, or how do you know when to quit? This is after you've made the decision, after you know it's time to quit, after you've like talked to your founding team and maybe some of your advisors, and you've decided it's the end game now. What do you do, and what do you not do? So the I've got like four kind of steps here. Step zero I have is like tell everyone formally, right? So this is something that after our conversation over Keith's dinner table, after I took about a 2-month break, mental health break, we got back together and I was like, okay, I've got a plan for how we're gonna like, make this profitable and sustainable and all that stuff. And at the end of an hour and a half long conversation, Keith and I are like writing the letter to everyone saying, actually, we're going to shut this down. So first thing you do, tell everyone. That includes customers, friends, family, mentors, investors, employees. Write something down, send it out to everything. Doing this first is very important for so many reasons, but the main one I want to talk about is that it helps you with all the other steps I'm about to talk about. Which
Yeah. Good.
the next one being, and I have these in kind of like not in order of to do, but in order of priority. One is take care of your customers. So notify them that the product is shutting down. Give them a grace period to migrate. This is really important to know that you should do, like have to do, because it dictates how you spend money in those later game stages of like you need to know that you have to keep the lights on for like depending on your product, like months. I think we kept Lumastic on for 4 months afterwards, and like we're a SaaS product, and so like the other big part of taking care of our customers was helping them migrate to another product that another competitor that we had outlined as like this is the one that we think is most similar or collection of tools. If you don't have a direct comp, and giving them a list of competitors to switch to, and if time/relationship exists between you and a competitor, like building an automated way for them to migrate, and even potentially setting them up with like a 6-month free trial of the other service or whatever it is. Like these are really, really nice things that you can do for your customers. I say nice, but they're like very important. They're important for your reputation as a founder going forward. If you're in an industry that you like feel an affinity for and you think you might want to work in this space again, making sure that you take care of those customers is really important because it leaves those options open for you to start a new product later in the future and email them to say, hey, last one didn't work out, but you did kind of like it. Do you want to do you want to try my next one? And I joke, but that's a real thing. What do you think of that first step, Henry?
Absolutely valid. This one to me is kind of the easiest one to
So
do,
easy.
maybe. Yeah, so good
Especially
order of priority, and
yeah, it's so easy. And especially if you kind of like us, had a product people kind of liked, but were like not devastated, that it was shutting down. We did have one person that was pretty sad about it, but I think they mostly just liked the vision and the idea, that we were selling to them, like
yeah,
back to
and
that previous conversation. But yeah, it's like such a vital part of it, and it makes it a lot easier when you're in that situation because you're not you're disappointing people, but you're not disappointing people to the level of the next two ones that we'll talk about. Which
yep.
number two is taking care of your employees, right? Like I want to talk about this specifically because I think so many founders do this so wrong. And it's one of those situations where when we're talking about the impact of having people operate on incomplete information, it can be catastrophic to your employees' lives if you all of a sudden, with like 3 weeks left on payroll, say, actually, sorry, we have to shut down. You all have to find new jobs. Or like you're all laid off, right? Like that's just like a horrible, shitty thing to do to somebody. So don't be that person, right? When you formulate your company, make a plan, a shutdown plan. It is so likely that this is going to happen to you. And so writing down the action plan of like how you're going to shut down is something that you can do so easily when you don't have to do it, right? When it's not you're making a decision to execute this plan, you're just making the plan. And part of that plan should be that our cutoff date in terms of like money, right? Like we're running out of money, should be 3 months of payroll prior, right? So you would have a 3-month runway to shut down the company before you're actually out of money. And that 3-month previous date is your actual cutoff. That's the one that you have in your mind. And it's the one you stick to when you hit it. Or you do the, second part of my bullet points is you tell your employees when you hit it, you say, hey, we're riding it, we're riding the edge. This might be it. Right. And you tell everyone so that they can make their own decision about whether or not to stay on the ship. Right? So many founders are like, oh, well, if I told everyone that we were riding razor thin margins and we were working week to week, people would leave. And it's like, yeah, of course they would leave. And by
Yeah,
robbing them of that information, you're causing for some of them like potential extreme financial harm, right? Like, and it is not your place to make the decision, in some paternalistic way about whether or not people should stay on with your sinking ship. You should let them decide to stay on with the ship. And if you've done a good job in terms of, like leadership, motivation, like making people feel safe at work, all that stuff, it's likely that the people that can stay, that are willing to ride out the sinking ship, have not that much to lose in terms of external responsibility, will stay. Um, that was a soapbox, Henry. What do you think about? What do you think about that?
I mean, I've heard people call this even more extreme as like economic terrorism.
I would
Like you
agree with that.
cannot leave people out to dry like this. And so I feel like a lot of startups and founders feel like my employees have taken on great risk already to join us. I've given them equity in order to compensate for that risk. Things not going well, that was to be expected. They should be prepared for
Hmm.
that at a moment's notice. We can do better,
We can do so
right?
much
We could
better.
do a
And
lot
so
better
many
than that.
times they're not. So many times people are not trained like founders when they join startups, right? They're like trained like anybody in our society that looks and watched, The Social Network, right? They think it's going to be a fun time, small company, that you're going to have a lot of responsibility. No one thinks about the period where at any given point in time we would just shut down and I wouldn't have a job, right? And so it's your role and responsibility as the founder to give them that information, and to inform them about when you hit that kind of go no go, and whether or not you collectively decide to continue or to not. Um, Part of that too is if people do decide to leave, right, in that 3 month period while you're shutting down, you help them find new jobs. This is something that I think it's Stuart Butterfield, of the founder of Slack. Yep, Stuart Butterfield, founder of Slack and Flickr. Before he started Slack, he started a kind of like game company. And when the game company realized that they were shutting down, they had run out of money and time, he gave everyone, I think, a month and a half of, paid, we will help you find new jobs. And I think like 95% of people left that company with a new job. Don't quote me on that number, but it was a significant thing that made me feel inspirational about this is the way to do it. And so that's why I'm bringing it up. And this goes such a far way, just like with your customers who you've made sure it's been a very easy transition off of your product to show that you still care about them even at the end, right? Same goes for your employees. The people that will trust you so much more when you come to them again after a failure as a second time founder saying, I'm back in this arena, would you come join me on my new thing, right? That trust and relationship is going to be remembered. That loyalty to your employees is going to be remembered, and is going to be a big reason that they may or may not want to come back, is how you left them. Is that anything that resonates with you, Henry? Like anything you had experience with?
It's totally
Yeah.
valid. I haven't been in a position where I've even had, I mean, I've had runway, but I've never had a business that was reliably making consistent revenue and we were scaling it quickly in terms of
Mm-hmm.
headcount. So I haven't really had to make this, trade off in my mind, having kind of a plan for when it shuts down, because everything's kind of just been contract based.
Yeah.
There's always that end date. But I've been on the other side of it, and I've had friends and family on the other side of it, and it feels like, what you're recommending never happens, in the startup space. So it's definitely something to promote and, try to get people to take notice
Yeah,
of.
exactly. And again, I am not someone personally who has ever gotten to the point where, we raised $3 million and we are,
Mhm.
like 20K away from zero, right? So I, in some ways, can't imagine how much pressure that can put you under. What I can imagine is that you, as a founder, are strong and capable enough to perform these basic requirements of human decency about what to do when a thing that you've created and you're responsible for needs to be, put out to pasture. The last one I want to talk about is take care of your business. This is the one that I will admit, Keith and I are like not very, like we're not very good at, and still haven't completely finished the to-do list of, 3 years later. But collect all outstanding invoices so that you can do the finalized accounting. Sell off, like your inventory assets, like, and anything you possibly can in order to do the next one, which is like pay off all credit and debtors. Like these are all the things that you have to do. Again, if you have not taken, any money, all that stuff, this becomes a lot easier. And that's, another reason to recommend go slow, if you
Mhm.
can. But there are a lot of businesses that just require some sort of upfront capital. So this is all the stuff you have to do. This is something that, Keith and I were not super good at, and should have been more diligent with, which is cancel all your business credit cards and your subscriptions for your business, because you can get saddled with, hundreds of dollars of AWS fees like we did for months. And I believe those were on Keith's personal credit card. so just please do that. yeah, then close your business bank accounts and other financial accounts. Again, something Keith and I have not done. Um, and distribute all remaining funds to all of the owners. Yeah, file all your disillusionment documents, do all that stuff. And then finally, blah, blah, blah. This is all stuff that you can find on the internet better. The last one I want to tell you is so important, and people skip over this one. Pay your taxes for the year that you shut down,
Mm,
because
yeah.
it gets really awkward and weird when you have to send the IRS something that's like, oh shit, I forgot that we like made a little bit of money in 2025. And thankfully, I think for most people this will not be an issue. Like if you've been making nominal money, like the IRS isn't going to come after you, but it can be worse. I have friends that it has been worse for, and it gets, once your business doesn't exist, it can fall to you as the owners. So just be sure that you button up all the stuff, get an accountant, finalize all that.
Yeah. And get your ducks in a row while it's still
Yeah,
fresh.
exactly.
You don't want to put it off. And yeah, I've been hit by a lot of those same subscriptions, which tells you something about the
The
SaaS
SaaS
model.
model.
I'll tell you that.
If it works,
It's a
it
brutal
works.
game.
It's
Yeah.
like we're all victims of it, and some of us are beneficiaries. But
Yeah.
outside of that, shutting down your business is very hard. It can be an emotionally charged time. And so the other thing that I want to make sure that people know is like, take care of your customers, take care of your employees, take care of your business, and take care of yourself. Right. Like after we shut down Lumastic, I went through like the worst depression that I have ever been in for like over a year. But seems to be the trend on this podcast. Go to therapy, like get help, talk to your friends and loved ones, and know that, yeah, it might not have worked out, but experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted, and you can always try again. I'm a testament to the fact that you can come out of a very dark time, feeling not so good about yourself, and be back in the arena. So take care of yourself.
Excellent, excellent words. I think that, you said it can be an emotionally charged time. It is
It
an
is.
emotionally charged time every single time. And yeah, I mean, we are social creatures. Talking about your feelings, talking about your experiences is critical, whether it's therapy, friends, family, or starting a podcast, getting these ideas out, super important for everybody. And, others can learn from your experiences as well.
Yes. Now, Henry, on to a lighter subject. What does minimal mean in an MVP? My
Oh
God.
my
My
god.
God.
This is my biggest blind spot. This is my biggest challenge. MVPs are so hard for me to conceptualize and to like get off the ground. It never feels like enough. I always want
Mm-hmm.
more in my minimal product.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. It's so fun in the early days to think about all the things that your product could do, right?
Yeah.
Like in some ways, every idea you have becomes like this rabbit hole that only gets deeper, right? Like where the uh all of its capability, is the thing that then excites you more and more and more, like as you go deeper. And it's so hard to come back to the surface to mix the metaphor and see the top of the iceberg, right? Which the top of the iceberg is your MVP, right? The bottom of the iceberg is everything else that doesn't really matter in those early days. And you figuring out where the water line is the very important part. There are a couple of strategies that I have found over the years to work really well for this. The first one is to figure out the kind of the part of your app that if that doesn't exist, there is nothing else. The way that I recommend doing this is making a breadboard diagram, which you can read about on the interwebs, but it is essentially a way, even on my own website, plug drew.is.cool. but
Sure.
basically, it's a diagram, and maybe I'll send Henry some screens so that if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see this visually. But instead of like making a prototype of your product in like screens, you think about it in terms of like only text and actions, right? And you start linking text and actions together in terms of the workflow of how things work for your user throughout the app. And then you can quickly see, based on the in and out points, of those little lines where the biggest majority of the in and out points are, and those are the things that you have to do first, because those are the things that are central and everything connects to or out from. That will be much easier to understand if you click the link in the description to go read an article that I wrote, or are watching on YouTube and have looked at the little thing that I sent to Henry. Okay. So that's number one. And a concrete example of this, I'm working on an app called Rexy, which is a recommendation sharing and storing application. Obviously, in that world, the central things that you have to do are to be able to see things that people have recommended to you and send recommendations. Now, that might not sound like a very interesting app. Like we have screens for like a social homepage where you can see like things that your friends have recommended and all that stuff. But none of that matters, especially with point number 2, is when you think about who will use this at launch. And who will use this at launch for us is 25 of our friends and family. Right. And in that world where there's only 25 people on this app, there does not need to be a home feed that is showing you things that your friends, because there's only like of a group of 25 at max, you could see 25 things. Right. Like so that's one screen that just doesn't exist. The other one is the profile screen, which is the thing that shows you like, lets you friend somebody and lets you see like the things that they have been recommending and stuff. Obviously, that doesn't matter in an app that at launch will have no recommendations from anyone. Right? It's a useless screen at that point. It's so easy in our heads when we're designing to think about what this will look like, a year from now, or in some best case scenario. The thing that you have to think about is in software design, what's called the empty state, right? Which is what it looks like when there's nothing there. And if what it looks like when there's nothing there is uninteresting or unuseful, it doesn't need to be in your app at launch. Henry, what do you think about these tips?
Yeah, really good pointed tips on exactly how to pare down your MVP. I definitely fall often into the trap of sketching out a million different
Scope
features
creep.
and trying to prioritize them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
scope creep definitely happens. And when you're working with freelancers to bring your ideas to life, whether it's design or development, I always feel so bad about the scope creep. So these are super important things to keep in mind and to hopefully live
Yeah.
by when you're
Yeah,
MVP.
because that's what really makes it minimal viable, right? Like that's all we're going for. Anything else is extra. Henry, thanks for another great episode. Thanks for always being someone super fun to do this with. Dear listener, if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. And if you're feeling spicy and nice, and you're listening to this on any other podcast platform, please feel free to leave us a review. We would love to hear your feedback. As always, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.